Arena, CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel, CNN chief national correspondent John King, Democratic strategist, former senior advisor to the Biden and Harris campaigns Adrian Elrod, and former Republican Speaker pro tempore Patrick McHenry. We're also joined by CNN political commentator, former Trump White House communications director Alyssa Farah-Griffin. Thank you all so much for being here today. John King, let me start with you. I think it was good to start off with Sondland's great reporting. There's still some unanswered questions about kind of the origins of that. But what we saw play out in Indiana, I mean, it proved both that the president still has what it takes in a primary setting, and also that he's still pretty focused on how people are crossing him, no matter how high or low their profile may be.
Both of those things are very, very, very true. If you look at the core, the solid core, think of a baseball, and the core in the middle of a baseball of the Trump base, it is strong. And the president can direct it. And they spent a ton of money here, a remarkable amount of money, Republican on Republican money, to do this. There's no question the president still has control over the hardcore mega base of the Republican Party, even more so in a very conservative state like Indiana. I think you could at the same time look at other results yesterday and results in 2025 and 2026 up to this point and make the argument that the outer ball is fraying a little bit. The strings on the baseball, the core of the baseball is still mega Trump, but the strings on the baseball are starting to fray. How much? We'll learn in November, but there is evidence of that.
What was your most significant piece of evidence in that direction last night that you would point us to?
Well, number one, the margins in Michigan in a bellwether local race. It's a 50-50 district that the Democrats are winning big again. But I don't even just look at last night. And plus, also, if you talk about, well, I'll give you one from last night. The Mahoning County Democratic chairman in Ohio. That's Youngstown, Lordstown, blue
Part
collar.
of Trump country,
Trump won it.
right?
Trump won that Trump won that the second time, 2020. For the first time since Richard Nixon. Then he won it again in 2024. That was a Jim Traficant blue-collar union district. More Democrats turned out in the primary yesterday in Mahoning County. The Democrats didn't have any contested contests. Democrats just want to vote.
There were no Democratic primaries available to vote, and they showed up anyway.
Democrats want to vote.
Love it. Okay, so Congressman McHenry, I mean, what would you point to here? I mean, the president did have wins across the board in these races that he played in, but I mean, as John pointed out, they spent an enormous amount of money, considering what kind of money is normally spent in races like this.
Yeah, but a small amount nationally. It's a pittance, and given how much money the Republicans have and MAGA Inc. has, frankly.
Right.
And a very small amount, considering they want to show that the president still owns the Republican Party. He still remains, at this moment, the most popular president within his own party ever. And that gives him power here on Capitol Hill. You still see Senate candidates seeking his endorsement to win the primary. Andy Barr, in particular, Congressman Barr in Kentucky, gets the Trump nod. He's going to be the nominee in 2 weeks. Then you see on the Democratic side, no countervailing force like that. You see the weakness of Schumer having lost his chosen candidate. You now have, as the de facto Democratic nominee in Maine, somebody who has a Nazi tattoo on their chest, still highly touted because he apologized for having a Nazi tattoo. Michigan, complete mess for Democrats. Otherwise, you've seen some successes with Democratic recruitment with Senate candidates, but substantially fraying in key states where they need to have a better outcome.
But we've also seen a lot of success in some of the special elections. In fact, nearly every single special election that has taken place since the 2024 presidential campaign up until now, Democrats have either flipped the seats or they've significantly shortened the margins in a lot of these districts. So, I mean, sure, we don't have, you know, an heir apparent who's definitely going to be the president or be the Democratic nominee in 2028, but we've got a lot of things going for us because prices are still too high. Trump has failed on his promises to the American people. We're out of self-imposed war that he created. There's a lot of concerns the American people have, and their pocketbooks are not any better than they were a couple of years ago. So I think Democrats are actually doing a little bit better than you give us credit for.
Well, and frankly, it's the benefit in a midterm is being on the out. It is such a great benefit. My party's won a number of midterms
that is true.
by offering nothing and just not being in power.
That is true. That is true.
Look,
Jamie?
There's no question the candidate matters. You can see that in all these different states. But what I took away from last night is, yes, defy Donald Trump at your peril. And let's just remember, for context, the reason he went after them was because these Indiana Republicans stood up to him on redistricting. But there's the primary and there's the general. And his candidates have made it through the primary. Let's see what happens in the general.
Well, Alyssa Farah-Griffin, let me put this to you, because this has, of course, been really the central question for any Republican in the Trump era who has wanted to push back on him on anything in any way, which is that for many of them in a general election contest, if you actually are in a swing district, and this is true for members of the House of Representatives that are in such a scenario, it's a diminishing number of them, but they still exist. They can't win with Trump because his approval rating is in the tank, gas prices are where they are. But they can't win without him because of what John King was talking about, the core of the baseball, right? The core of the Republican base. Where does that leave Republicans heading into this midterm election?
It's a complicated place to be. And I want to point something out. I mean, there are careers of politicians that have been ruined, Republican politicians, for simply breaking with Trump on minor issues. They may vote with him 95% of the time, but from Mark Sanford to Tom Rice to Peter Meyer to anyone who voted for his first impeachment to these Indiana state senators, Donald Trump has made clear he will go after you, he will spend money against you, and he's got a very good scorecard of being able to take people out electorally who have gone against him. So that strikes fear in people who oftentimes need to, in a tough midterm race or a tough off-year election, be able to run with some distance from him. I also think what's notable, and we should never forget, is sort of the historic talent of Republicans that we lost because they just decided not to run again in the Trump era. From Chris Sununu to Charlie Baker to Paul Ryan onward, there is this fear factor that if Trump comes after you, your political career is over. And look at the Liz Cheneys of the world. That really is kind of a reality that many folks are facing. And so they have to make this decision, full loyalty to him, or go the Thomas Massie route that we're going to see in the weeks ahead and see if you can somehow squeak through when running against Trump.
Yeah, really interesting. And actually, that brings us to the second kind of big topic of conversation I've been thinking about and wrestling with the last day or so. And John King, I want to put this to you. And that is, of course, the shadow primary that's already going on between Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance. And, Rubio had what I think we'll look back on as maybe not a critical, but certainly a key day in the narrative arc of wherever he's going when he went to the White House podium yesterday, after having been kind of on the sidelines in terms of the Iran debate. What did you make of his performance? And, his performance there came as J.D. Vance, of course, was on the road bringing, they're showcasing two different potential ways of taking the Trump era into a new Republican era.
Look, the two of them would deny a competition. Let's put that out there. The two of them would say, no, all is good here. Anytime, if you do have aspirations, anytime you can get the White House podium and a big national or international platform, that's good for you. It's a good test run for you. The Secretary of State certainly seemed to be doing what he wanted to do. There are a lot of people out there who don't agree with what he's saying, maybe, but he thought he was there. I would posit this. The Trump voters I have in my All Over the Map group tend to talk more about Rubio right now than they do about Vance. They find him interesting in the sense that he was not a Trumper. They're Trumpy Trump voters, and here's this guy who's been brought into the fold, and they're kind of impressed that he's navigated it, and they even give him credit sometimes for nudging Trump a little bit. We'll see how that one plays out. I will posit this, though. We can watch this play out now in May of the midterm election year. It really doesn't matter until we know what happens in the midterms. If the Republican Party gets shellacked and Donald Trump gets repudiated by the American people, that hurts them both. They serve in his administration. The price of gas is still going up because of the Iran war. Whether J.D. Vance opposed it in private, he's on the team now, and they both will suffer from that as it goes up. I would tell you right now in both parties that if you are not of Washington, I would give you a better chance in 2028 today than I would anybody in Washington. That's not to criticize his performance. It's not even about their performance. Yeah. It's about the mood of the American people who, on both parties, from my most Bernie AOC voters to the most Trumpy voters, they don't think the solutions are in this town right now.
Congressman, what do you think?
Well, the primary still goes through President Trump's through his nod. I'm sorry.
Are you sure about that, though? In 2020? No, I ask it as a serious question. If they get shellacked in 2026, more non-Trump Republicans are going to think, okay, maybe there's an opening out there. I don't know are you sure about that? Does it last?
Yes. If President Biden can effectively control the Democratic Party, get the nomination, and yet not really be there, President Trump can for sure give the mantle of leadership to someone in the Republican Party. Granted, his overall popularity, whatever it may be, the internal control is there. The competition, the interesting part is going to see who actually emerges, who's willing to do that, and whether or not any of those governors across the country, somebody not of Washington, is willing to get in. That's going to be the complicated piece. That's going to be the interesting dance we're going to see over the next year and a half.
Jamie Gangel, one interesting number two is if you look at the approval for J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, it's interesting because Vance is tracking very close to President Trump, right? Rubio has this edge, right? And when I talk to Democrats, they'll say privately that they're a little bit more nervous about maybe it's not Rubio himself. To John's point, we're a long way out, but we're not. I kind of disagree with you, John. I got to be honest. But anyway, but he has a little bit of this. Democrats will say he may have an appeal that's broader, that's a little different, that in a general election anyway, yes, you have to survive the primary, but in a general election might cut against Democrats and in Rubio's favor.
So two things. We were talking just a moment ago about likable. Who is more likable? And that does play a role in this. And I think what we saw from Marco Rubio yesterday in the briefing room, he was funny, he was relaxed, very different. He presents very differently from J.D. Vance. He may also, we've seen him on the sidelines. Why isn't he in Islamabad negotiating? Why did J.D. Vance go? Maybe that ends up being better.
Maybe that works in his favor, maybe so. Alyssa Fair-Griffin, let me give you a very brief last word as we wrap up here on this, since I think you know both of these men. Where do you sit?
I think Marco Rubio is a political heavyweight, and I think he benefits from the fact that he's now accepted by MAGA world and America First, but also by those who are still skeptical of President Trump. The really interesting thing is going to be, what does he do after the midterms? If it goes the way we think and Republicans get shellacked, does he step aside, say, I want to spend some time with my family to create some distance from the administration heading into 2028? Or does he stick around through the final stretch of the Trump administration and kind of hope for the best? But he's an incredibly formidable candidate that has broad appeal, and I think in a general election goes much further than a J.D. Vance would.
Really interesting. All right, Alyssa Fair-Griffin, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Come back soon. The rest of our panel is going to stand by. Coming up next.